Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Blair Douglas joining us here again today. Excited to have her here. She's a certified yoga therapist and founder of Malachite Yoga from beautiful Denver, Colorado. Welcome to beautiful Blair. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing, Jill?
I'm doing great. Excited for the 4th, a day off tomorrow. What about yourself?
Also excited. We are actually heading to Tucson, which is going to be, I think, 108 tomorrow. So a little toastier than I maybe anticipated and or wanted for being outside. I think there won't be much time outside, but the fireworks will be amazing from our house there. So I'm just trying to preemptively be excited about that part.
Got it. Got to do what you have to do. Well, please, Blair,
Yeah.
introduce yourself. And of course, tell us the website, how we find you to start today.
Yeah, so I'm Blair. I'm a certified yoga therapist, like Jill just mentioned. My company is Malachite Yoga, and you can find me at malachiteyoga.com, which is MALACHITE yoga.com.
Beautiful. And tell us a little bit about what you do, how you can help our listeners, and we're excited for today's show, pre-4th.
Yeah. Pre-4th. So kind of how I work is like we talked about in the last couple episodes too. So with yoga therapy, it's somebody who's highly educated in the skill set of yoga, but has a specific certification specializing in therapeutics for yoga. So my specialty is in chronic pain, functional mobility, and neurological disorders. And so I work with individuals mostly on goal setting. So whatever goals they have set, we work together to help try to achieve those goals, make changes in their lives that would help improve that by me giving them like protocol plans. Basically, they do at home, we do them together. They keep them for life, and it's a skill set over time they can continue to utilize even when I'm not around to help maintain the lifestyle they'd like to live.
Wonderful. And also, we've had some great conversations in the past about your work and the type of people you help and what, yoga therapy actually is. And just to point out here, you mentioned, it's different than going to a yoga class. Someone just tuning in new might say, what's yoga therapy? Can you just break down some of the benefits of it too? Thank you.
Totally. And there's a ton of benefits if you're somebody who is an active practitioner in yoga. By no means am I saying don't go to a yoga class. They're wonderful. What I specialize in, though, is really specific to each individual person. So when you go to a public class, that teacher is overseeing a whole room of people. So we're teaching to the room, not to an individual person. So when you see me, everything we work on and do together is based around you and your needs. So it's completely unique to you. So whatever skill set I come in the education I have, I'm going to utilize that to help then build you the best practice for yourself. And sometimes that doesn't look like a traditional yoga practice. And I think that's something that's important for people to know. Majority of my clients are not active practitioners. A lot of them have never stepped on a yoga mat. You don't ever need to know anything about yoga. You can almost treat it as if I am yoga, like me as Blair showing up to see you, and you don't need to know. We can work from scratch. And, it's a mixture of using every lineage we have in yoga and then me as a person to help build something for you that you could utilize.
Oh, interesting. All right. Thank you so much. What else do you have for us?
So, I was thinking about today and I got really excited over the weekend. I went on a girls' trip to Vegas, which is not my normal at all. And there was a lot of late nights where I was like, when do I get to go to bed? But nonetheless, we ended up coming across this man who we enveloped into our group and started talking with a bunch. And I was so just fascinated by his story somewhat because it was such a good interaction point with what I'm doing that I asked him, we left Vegas and he went his way. And I said, is there a way we could set up a call? I'd like to talk to you a little further about your story. I know you're not my client, but I've been doing some work and I think it's a valuable story to share with people just as a relatable point. And so, today I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about his story and then kind of how that interacts with what I'm doing in my practice and just pain science and education.
Oh, awesome. I want to hear more. Go for it, please.
Yeah. So over the weekend, like I said, we were in Vegas and we met this gentleman and he had kind of made some comments and told us like in the past couple of years he had a lot of chronic pain going on to the point where it become somewhat crippling to him in the sense of mobility and moving around and doing
Mhm.
things on his own. And so this man at the age of 25, basically he was out on a bike, like he was out on his bike just riding around town. He told me he started feeling sensations in his back that then started shooting into pain through his legs. So he gets home, goes to bed, wakes up the next morning, feels a ton of like, some pain, discomfort, but also just a locking feeling
Mhm.
through the muscles, through the backs of his leg into his back and soreness, where it's like, I ride my bike. He's extremely active, right? This is a very fit 25-year-old man. No pre-injury, no nothing along that line where it would cause this locking and sensation to start happening. About 3 weeks later down the road, he is putting on a pair of boots, has a back spasm, and everything went downhill from there.
Oh,
So after said back spasm is at the point where he's like, I can't really move around. If I sit down, it feels like a vice is holding onto my back. I am starting to just like need help and support to do things. So start seeing specialists. And I mean like top specialists in this industry. So he's seeing people doing MRIs, they're doing blood work, they're doing all the things. There is no answer. There's no damage to anything. They can't find anything. They're not really sure what to do because he's in so much physical pain at this point. He then like, within that year ends up moving back in with his parents because he needs that much support
wow.
around him.
Mhm.
He was like, I could still do my own hygiene stuff, but like making a meal, doing these other things was not possible anymore. So he's in, and he told me, he's like, I was spending almost 80% of my day in my room on my back because there was no other way for me to go around. So, still, there's no injury that's happened. He hasn't been in an accident. And there's no answers. And so he's kind of at this point where you're like, what should I do here? He's seeing PTs, he's still seeing specialists. They're giving him steroid shots. It's still not working. So he starts doing some research on his own, finds a group and organization that knows about pain science as well. And from our discussion about it, it's a very similar like understanding and lineage of pain science and information. In the last like 10 to 15 years, this information is really picked up. There's a lot better data points to work
Mhm.
from. And I won't mention this group's name, not because I don't think they're valid. It's only because I haven't been able to do back research on them. But he basically started this 12-week program with them, goes into this 12-week program, starts learning other things. Like, what else is happening here besides, like, I'm in pain, I can't get around, like, but there's no damage. Like, no one
Yeah.
can tell me what has happened.
Mhm.
And he starts to learn, like, okay, I have a lot of stressors happening. So if I can start to control my stressors, that can impact my pain, right? Also, like this is a thing that we all traditionally do. If you know you've done something like stubbed your toe like 5 times on a table, you preemptively, if you walk near the table, sometimes will get a little bit of a pain, or your body will try to react to get you to not do that. So if you've already thought about it happening, possibly, a lot of times we preemptively will give ourselves pain just anticipating the pain potentially even happening. It can show up. So he's
True.
learning this skill set that then all of a sudden starts having this aha moment. He's like, it's the first time I felt validated. Like it wasn't just me alone, but also knowing that there was other outlets where I could change it. It wasn't like it was going to go right tomorrow, but all of a sudden I had another resource. But he also started learning like if I go to PT, when I leave PT, I need to do something that makes me really happy.
Mhm.
Like that is something like because PT is kind of miserable for me to go to because it wasn't feeling good. So he'd go to coffee right afterwards, and he's like, and my pain would decrease.
Oh, wow.
So one of the other questions I had for him is like, okay, so this all happens, and it took up about 2+ years of his life, right? He is trying to figure all this out. And I said, before that happened, like before the initial day one of like, we were on the bike, we have this sensation, something's happening. Was there anything that happened prior to that was like really stressing out, giving anxiety? And he had quite a list, right? And I said, okay. But it wasn't like it happened the day before he went on the bike, right? It was a couple years right before that that were really hard, where there was like, some deaths in the family, some other situations, some anxiety, depression going on. There's this blend of things happening to this person because they are a person, they're a whole person. And my own relation to it too is the understanding where, okay, this person has this other stuff going on here. We have a trauma, we have grief, we have stuff happening. Those things can manifest at any point and just show up. So, one of the things I like to teach people about too, which somewhat relates to this, so people kind of have a better understanding, because it can sometimes seem odd when somebody's like, okay, well, but that happened a year and a half ago. How is that impacting me now?
Yeah.
That doesn't fully relate. So there's this wonderful human who is one of my teachers when I was in inner peace, and she was actually teaching the module on bedside yoga, which is for people that have been diagnosed with a like they're going to pass, they're in hospice, there's situations like that. But she was explaining grief to us in a way that was the first time where it really made sense to me, where I think sometimes in our hearts and what we want to think is like something happens, and then you move on. That's not really how it works. So the way she describes it, which is really beautiful, her name is Molly Kenny. She describes it as like if you're on a hike that's on a switchback. So imagine you're on a switchback going up a hill. Imagine there's a tree at some point on that switchback that you can kind of see from almost every angle of the switchback. But throughout the hike, it changes, like how big it is, how small it is. It's always there, but your perspective constantly is changing on it. It's like that little things, like where you moved back across and it got a little bit bigger, unbeknownst to you, because you smelt something, saw something, heard something that re-triggered a memory.
Yeah. Wow.
Those are one of those things that can kind of come up. So the interesting part with talking with him is like, this is somebody who is super athletic, 25 years old, had a lot of great things like very much will tell you, like he's like, I had a really like great stuff happening to me. I also had this other stuff going on though that just was weighing him down. And so part of my relation with him is like, he's not my client. He's allowed me to tell this story because it's such a good representation of, this is a unique story to him, but it's not unique to the situation that's at hand with a lot of people living with chronic pain.
Wow. You got me thinking now with the PT therapy. I've been doing PT 3 times a week for my arm for the tendonitis, and turns out it's not carpal tunnel. I did the nerve test, but still the arthritis and tendonitis now for the past 2 months. And I can only imagine it lasting 2 years. I mean, but there's things that we could do. But that's interesting. His mental health status when he would go get coffee afterwards. I just, wow, thinking about doing things that could, how that all connects, right? How do I say it? But
yeah, no. And like one of the other outlets he's been using, which I think is brilliant on his part, like he's really, he's a very sweet soul, and he's very into like animals and he loves them. And so he started volunteering at an animal shelter. The second he was able to get more mobile again and like have the ability to start walking around more and being more active and being able to lift stuff again and do all the things he'd been kind of putting off, he was like, I have the ability and time right now. I think I'm going to start volunteering in some way. And he's like, it helps because I'm giving back, but it also helps because it takes my brain off of me over analyzing every situation that's happening and overthinking to the point, because there's this weird balance that happens. Some of us are like so inner focused that like, right, the pain can really shoot up because you're so attached to it, which isn't bad or good. It's just an acknowledging thing of like, I'm aware this is the kind of person I am. And then there's others that are completely want to disconnect from their body. So they will do everything to ignore and never check in with themselves. So when you have those two extremes, you finding a balance in the middle can be perfect for people. And so that's what he did. He got educated, he's seeing results, but he also is like, one of those things that's really helping me is like, I started volunteering at an animal shelter and giving back. And that also is bringing me a lot of joy in my life. And that's made also a huge difference for him.
wow, amazing. Well, remind us how we
Yeah.
can reach out to you, Blair. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Of course. You can reach out to me anytime on my website. It's malachiteyoga.com, which is Malachite yoga.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, let's
Yeah.
continue. What else did you want to share with us today?
Yeah. So as he and I are having this discussion, I'm like smiling, right? I'm like
Yeah.
talking to him, smiling, and I kind of giggled at one point. I said, I'm not giggling at your
Mhm.
story by any means, but it's such a refreshing experience to talk to somebody else who, like, yes, like he wasn't seeing a yoga therapist. He actually did start doing yoga though on a like at least 3 times a week to up to a week, like weekly, and that was finding benefit for him because he finally asked one of his doctors while this whole situation is going on. He
Mhm.
says, is it dangerous for me to move? Like, am I actually going to cause myself harm? I'm having so many misfirings of information happening in my body. And the doctor looked at him and was like, no, you can move. Like, keep moving. Because that's one of the biggest things is we shut down. And there is a difference between like if we actually have tissue damage. So say I was hit by a car, I have tissue damage. Something is going to happen and we need to still support that. And that might be a time when less movement's happening because we're healing. And that's a
Yeah.
very specific thing, right? When we're actually healing because there actually is damage because we've been in some kind of accident, that's important to acknowledge and not lump into like, I'm getting total misreadings and like I'm hearing chronic pain because pain is not an accurate indicator of tissue damage, but it is if you have just been in a serious accident or something else has happened, to note that too, because those are important things to know. But for him, because they could find zero things, he hadn't been in an accident. The doctor was like, you can move. And it was the first, it was like, it was such a relief to hear somebody tell me, like, I'm not continually like harming myself by moving. So I got moving again and it hurt, but then also like learning where the point of, okay, here's where I can go to today and being proud of that point and then being like, okay, so now I'm going to turn around and like go back and relax. And he used a great example of like somebody who hasn't been to the movies in a long time. Sometimes feeling like a failure immediately because you're like, I can't even get to I can't even sit through the whole movie. They're
Mhm.
like, okay, well, you haven't done this in a couple of years or a long time. Baby steps, like it's inch by inch happening. So maybe the first time you try to go to a movie, it's literally just getting ready to go to the movie. And you've done that one step. Okay.
Yeah,
The
you're
next
right.
time it's a
You're
little
right.
more. But for him too, what's hard is he's living in a body that looks very functional and movable and capable. And
But
the judgment that came from that, though, is what he told me. The other hard part was he didn't look
part.
handicapped.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of things that came up for him too via other people interacting with him and accusatory of him of like, why are you having this woman pick this up for you? Or why aren't you helping this person? And like things along that line where we forget sometimes as a society, just because somebody looks able-bodied does not mean in that moment their body is functioning the way they're used to it functioning, nor is like
Mhm. Correct.
and it's very hard mentally. Like it can really mess with people mentally. He told me it did. It was like, for men especially, and this is my opinion specifically, of like you do see them, they want to achieve these things, they feel strong, they have all this stuff going on, to pull that out. And just like for women, but for him, he's like, it felt like people had put me on, on at this pedestal of like, you should be the one lifting this, you should be the one doing this. And they had hired somebody to help him, and that person was a female, and people would call him out in random places like at UPS and stuff. And he's like, it felt awful. I couldn't, it just felt super demoralizing. And that's where it's a good reminder for people, even when I'm interacting with them, to be conscious of who you're talking to. You don't know what's happening with them. And he said too, like, he'd go in and see doctors sometimes and he needed to tell them more than they would allow him to to actually say. He'd get shut down quickly because, they have, and this is a hard part of Western medicine, which I think we have amazing humans taking care of us. By no means would I ever say, don't go to your doctor, don't do this stuff. But it is hard. Sometimes we're so packed in our healthcare industry that they need to see 25 patients that day. And so finding that outlet where somebody actually can hear you is important. And he found out like he was doing psychotherapy and other therapy stuff. And that was important for him. And that's kind of too where like I come in for some people is I'm the person that will sit there for an hour. And sometimes that's all we do is talk, and they need to tell me their story. And their story is actually important to me because even though that story does not define them as a like being for me, it's part of them, and it's part of what they've experienced.
Been through and what they're going through. Yeah.
Exactly. So I, when I approached him about this, I was like, I've been doing this work and for a long time, and I know you're not one of my clients, and he's not one of my clients, like, but he's learned stuff and he's utilizing the same things that I'm giving to my clients. And but he had to piecemeal it together, and it wasn't as easy as it could have been if he had known ahead of time there was these other resources that weren't told to him, right? So it's been one of those things where it's really fascinating to get to talk to these people and hear their story and how long it took them to get there. And it's not that, just by working with a yoga therapist, whether it's chronic pain or something else, things are going to get fixed overnight. And by no means would I ever tell any of my clients, like, you're going to have no pain by the end of this. It's that we're going to change your pain and impact it so that you feel more like you have control of your own body, and you feel safe in your own, like, or safer in your own
Yeah.
body, or more stable in your body, regaining your trust, because it's really quickly lost when we're suffering that much. It's not just, oh, something slightly aches. It impacts everything. So my big takeaway from this weekend, I'm like talking to him is, here's somebody who's really young. And like, I will say right now, I have more young clients than I have old. And when I say old, I mean like in their 60s or 70s. I have more people in their like 30s to 20 age range right now
Okay.
suffering with chronic pain.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot happening for people. And it's sometimes hard because we've all been through stuff, but we've all been through a pandemic. And
Yes.
I constantly have to remind people, they're like, oh, I had a really great upbringing. I had this, I've had a great life. And it's like, yes, but you also lived through a whole pandemic, which was scary for a lot of people. And so we sometimes forget like that
Yep.
could have caused a lot of like trauma and grief and other things because we all were touched in some way by it.
And that's the one good thing I always say, to know we're not alone. Something we
Mm-hmm.
finally all experienced. We can all empathize, relate, because it was so hard in so many different ways, but we all were in it together, which always makes things easier because you don't feel alone. But doesn't mean there's effects from it, obviously. But yeah, that's the one. And I also look at the good that came out of it, because there's so much good that came out of it. I think a lot of people are more aware of the need to get help, ask for help, live your best life,
Yes.
do everything you can, for yourself. Why not? Life is so preciously short. You never know when it's going to be your last day. So might as well make the best of it and get healthier and get the help you need and travel more, whatever your goal or desire is, but to live the happiest life and pain-free life. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of it for him, because when this happened was October of 2020. So the pandemic
Oh,
had happened, like had started. And he
man.
said, I felt like isolation was not good for me. Like that was really, I think, could have been some of the trigger points. And it's not that one thing did it for him. And like, I don't know that. And I'm
Yeah.
sure, and I don't know if he knows that, but like, it could be a combination of things. But yeah, there was a lot of perks, and there's other stuff though that we kind of forgot that maybe is still living in the body, that's important just to, it's not that we need to dwell on it. It's just the acknowledgement of like there's other people there that also live through it. They could be there to support you. But you bring up such a good point too. Like living that life that you want to live like was a good eye opener for, I think, for a lot of people that were just kind of suffering along the way too, throughout, like before that as well.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. Let's remind everyone how we can reach out to you. And thank you, Blair.
Of course. You can reach me anytime. You can contact me via malachiteyoga.com, which is MALACHITE yoga.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you back, and always appreciate your skill, and you're just so compassionate to people, and it comes across. And if they want to reach out, do you offer an initial session to someone?
I do. Yeah. I always offer 15-minute free consultations just to make sure we're a good fit and you have an understanding of how yoga therapy works and the practice before you dive in initially. So contact me anytime.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to have you here and looking forward
Thanks.
to the next time. By the way, enjoy your 4th. Are you off tomorrow?
Yes, except for flights and stuff, but yes, I'm off.
Good. Enjoy the day. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. And to all of our listeners, stay tuned. More of the show is on the way.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.